In terms of metrics that you and your team track, what are some metrics that that you take a look at to make sure that things are working well in terms of that activation and onboarding?
Yeah, so we actually, one of the first things I did when I joined Mural, which is going on 2 years ago now, was to officially sit down and say, let's create our activation metrics. So thinking about setup, aha, and habit, and what exactly are those? How do we look at that from both a qualitative and a quantitative perspective? And here I love the Reforge framework of sort of working backwards from retention and really thinking about what are the things that are necessary from someone who's really ongoing getting value from your product to like what do they have to do in the very beginning, and really defining those specific moments. I like the methodology of breaking it out into individual metrics within a larger metric, because I think it also helps you sort of spot the areas in which you're losing people, and that can help you frame focus for your work. And so when we started on that journey 2 years ago, we were at the user-centric level, and we were thinking about we did call it the workspace creator, for lack of better terms, as the member type, but essentially the host or the facilitator. And we were talking about, okay, what does it take for them to get set up? Okay, they have to sign up, create a workspace, create this mural with content, but then what's next? And so that became the aha. Where's the aha? And it was about collaboration. So collaborating in that first week. And then habit, it's like collaborating continuously. But then there were separate definitions for the participant or the joiner, because for them, it wasn't about creating content. It was actually about coming in and joining that collaboration. And so we actually just finished and launched the company last week, a new set of definitions for activation in particular at the workspace level. That's kind of like we simplified a bunch of variables and said, how do you know what good collaboration looks like? And through the data and through our qualitative understanding of collaboration, we were able to kind of streamline into that definition of, okay, that's when someone's experienced the core value prop for the first time. They had that aha moment. We also look at things like 1-day retention and other things that kind of help us from as a leading indicator perspective. But in general, we're really measuring the steps of the activation journey.
I guess the other question is like, which other teams did you end up working on to make sure that this experience is seamless for new users?
Yeah. So I always say that product-led growth in particular is a team sport. It is not something that like one team by themselves can own. And in fact, if you have it set up that way, you're probably missing the point across the rest of your organization. And that obviously applies to onboarding, which is a really important part of any PLG motion. And so while my team specifically does own the onboarding experience, we own it specifically for free and self-serve users. But we have a customer success growth team that works on onboarding new members specifically into our enterprise accounts. So think more from like a high touch perspective. We have some other teams. We have a personalization team that owns our dashboard experience, and that's a really important part of a new user experience. So we work with them to make sure that, we have a differentiated and a right experience for a new member versus somebody who's been around with us for a while. So especially around learning content, that's a really important distinction. From our assisted sales customers, we have humans who run onboarding sessions, and we work really hard at gathering the learnings from humans or talking to humans. And then lastly, one thing I've learned working on onboarding and activation at my last two companies, this applies to MailChimp and Mural, is the core of the product is often the most important part of getting activation right. And so we work with our Canvas team a lot on UX improvements that support fast and easy onboarding. And as I talked a lot about, content creation is at the heart of a lot of this. If that's hard or if we're missing capabilities, then you'll get stuck there from an onboarding and activation perspective.
I love that hearing this, that it is a cross-functional effort, like really making sure that this experience is seamless. So that for people tuning in, it's not like it's a product thing, it's like it's a customer success thing. It really needs to be a cross-functional. You mentioned product-led growth needs to be a team sport. In terms of like those experiments that you and your team have run, are there ones that you can share that surprised you a bit in terms of the results, where you were expecting a result and then you got something else with that experiment?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I'll say working on onboarding and activation, as you know, is really hard. Moving the needle on a high level metric like activation is not something that you're typically going to do through just one experiment. From my experience, it's like the culmination of a whole bunch of improvements over time. And so I think time and time again, you're sort of surprised, like quests, for example, you would think just by itself, that's a great new experience. That'll improve activation. It didn't. It didn't improve the high level metric. Now, it did improve the amount of folks that were completing onboarding and learning. We saw that more people were creating content and getting to the setup moment. But ultimately, there's still a big transition between I'm comfortable with the basics and I'm creating content to I'm ready to collaborate with somebody else and get value. While that was a positive, improvement to our overarching experience, it didn't solve the, hey, I'm getting significantly more people to be successful ultimately in collaboration. And I think that's where the what and the how is so important. So in onboarding, we're trying to teach you both how to use this tool, this piece of software, but we're also educating you on use cases or actually how to collaborate. And so balancing those two things out from a learning perspective can be really difficult. I still see them as successes in the sense that they improved
learning
and are getting us one step closer to providing that great experience. But it's definitely a combination of work over time where individual level experiments might have been flat or very slightly positive. But when you started to stack those experience improvements over time, that's when you actually saw the results in terms of your overarching activation metrics.
Thank you for sharing that.